There is one moment in your life you have never been able to explain to anyone. By the end of this, you'll know whether it was chance, and the honest answer is stranger than either option you're expecting. The Hoover Dam Fatalities. You stand at the edge of Black Canyon, watching the Colorado River churn under hundreds of feet of concrete. The air smells of dry sandstone and wet cement. You feel a sudden chill when you look at the official casualty roster of the Hoover Dam. On December 20th, 1922, a land surveyor named J.G. Tierney slipped beneath the icy water. He became recorded as the very first casualty of the entire dam project. Exactly 13 years later, on December 20th, 1935, a second man drowned in the exact same canyon. His name was Patrick Tierney. He was J.G. Tierney's only son, and he was recorded as among the very last men to die on the dam. Your mind instantly demands a pattern. You want to believe the canyon held a grim family debt, or that time bent itself to align those two winter afternoons. But here is the knowledge detonation that changes how you look at history. The popular claim that father and son were the absolute first and last deaths of the Hoover Dam is actually contested and disputed by official Bureau of Reclamation records. Project Fatalism loved a neat narrative, so historians compressed dozens of industrial accidents into a haunting bookend. Yet, when you strip away the myth, the cold, durable core remains untouched. Father and son died in the same river on the exact same calendar date, 13 years apart. Why does your brain fight so hard against that pure calendar match? Because human intuition cannot easily accept that sheer randomness naturally produces horrific clusters. When millions of variables spin over decades, rare alignments are not just possible, they are mathematically guaranteed to happen to someone, somewhere. You do not notice the millions of days where history remains quiet. You only freeze when the numbers mirror each other across the canyon floor. The Petrovka Book. Picture yourself walking into a cold London rain in 1973, ducking into every bookstore on Charing Cross Road. One is actor Anthony Hopkins, freshly chosen for a movie version of The Girl from Petrovka. You need the original novel to study your character, but every shopkeeper shakes their head. The book is completely out of print. Frustrated, cold, and exhausted, you walk into Leicester Square Underground Station. You sit down on a wooden bench, and right beside you, damp from the underground draft, lies an abandoned paper copy of the exact book you searched for all afternoon. That alone would feel like a strange stroke of luck. But the story takes a sharper turn when you step onto the film set months later in Vienna. The author, George Pfeiffer, visits the set and casually admits to you that he doesn't even own a copy of his own book anymore. He had lent his personal copy, filled with his handwritten notes and marginalia, to a friend in London who promptly lost it from his car. You pull the retrieved book from your bag and show him the pages. Pfeiffer opens it, gasps, and identifies his own handwritten scrawl inside the cover. Now pause and look at what you are actually evaluating. This story is not a documented laboratory record. It is a well-attested personal anecdote passed down through interviews by two men who lived it. Yet, even when treated as a human memory rather than scientific data, it exposes how your mind handles probability. You view this moment as a cosmic miracle because you calculate the odds of finding that specific book on a specific bench. But you forget that across a lifetime of millions of mundane interactions, incredible spatial intersections periodically collide. The miracle isn't that the book was on the bench. The miracle is that your brain only remembers the collision. Titan and Titanic. Imagine holding a dusty, leather-bound novella published in 1898, 14 full years before the greatest maritime tragedy of the early 20th century. You flip through the yellowed pages of Futility, written by an obscure merchant sailor named Morgan Robertson. You read about a massive British ocean liner described as virtually unsinkable, equipped with triple-screw propellers, carrying thousands of wealthy passengers, and steaming at top speed across the freezing North Atlantic in April. The fictional vessel strikes an iceberg on its starboard side in the middle of the night and sinks with catastrophic loss of life, largely because it carries nowhere near enough lifeboats for everyone on board. The ship in the novella is named Titan. When the real Titanic sank in April 1912, under nearly identical circumstances, the public declared Robertson a clairvoyant prophet who had somehow glimpsed the future. But when you strip away the eerie names and examine the actual mechanics of maritime history, the supernatural illusion dissolves into a far sharper truth. Robertson was no mystic. He was an experienced sailor who understood naval architecture, industrial hubris, and commercial greed. He observed that shipping lines were rapidly enlarging their hulls without updating outdated safety laws that governed lifeboat ratios. He simply modeled what would happen when steel hit ice at 20 knots. What feels like a spooky glitch in reality is actually the power of deep domain knowledge, forecasting an inevitable industrial disaster. You often mistake rigorous pattern recognition for prophecy because your mind prefers magic over cold structural analysis. You look at Titan and Titanic and see a supernatural shadow, when in truth, you are simply watching human arrogance fail along the exact structural fault lines a sailor had already drawn. Monsieur de Fortgibu. Picture yourself sitting in a warm French dining room in the early 19th century, smelling the rich scent of rare English plum pudding. You are young poet Émile Deschamps, enjoying your first taste of the delicacy offered to you by an older gentleman named Monsieur de Fortgibu. 10 years pass. You walk into a Paris restaurant, see plum pudding on the menu, and order a slice, only to be told by the waiter that the very last portion was just served to a gentleman sitting across the room. You look over, and it is Monsieur de Fortgibu. 2 decades later, you are invited to an elegant Parisian dinner party where plum pudding is served once again. You recount the absurd tale of your 2 previous encounters with Fortgibu, joking to the host that the only element missing tonight is the man himself. At that exact second, the dining room door opens, and an elderly, visibly confused man steps into the room. It is Monsieur de Fortgibu. He had been invited to a completely different apartment in the building, taken a wrong turn on the stairwell, and walked into your room by total accident. This legendary sequence was recorded in Deschamps' memoirs and later cited by psychologist Carl Jung to illustrate synchronicity. When you experience 3 impossible coincidences with a total stranger across 40 years, your mind desperately wants to weave an invisible thread connecting your lives. But consider the identity mirror inside your own brain. Out of every meal you ate and every door opened over 40 years, your memory discarded thousands of mundane evenings and preserved only the one night the wrong door opened. You do not live in a scripted reality. You live inside a brain that relentlessly archives the improbable while throwing away the ordinary. The Jim twins. Imagine meeting a twin brother you haven't seen since you were a 4-week-old infant. You sit down in a quiet research office at the University of Minnesota in 1979. What are we even supposed to do with this? As psychologists start taking down your life histories, the similarities stop feeling like family resemblance and start feeling like a glitch. You both married a woman named Linda, got divorced, and remarried a woman named Betty. You both named your first son James Allen, or James Allen. You both drove the same model Chevrolet, smoked the same brand of cigarettes, built identical wooden benches around trees in your yards, and gave your childhood dogs the exact same name, Toy. The 1979 Minnesota study of twins reared apart cataloged these uncanny details as evidence of deep genetic behavioral wiring. But here is the critical dispute you must examine before you assume your choices are hard-coded at birth. Skeptical researchers later pointed out that the study actively searched for striking matches while ignoring the vastly larger pile of mundane differences that didn't align. The scientists never weighted the non-matches. Yet that very objection leads you to a profound realization about human cognition. When you look at twins like the Jims, your eye immediately locks onto the bizarre overlapping names while stepping right over the thousands of variables that didn't match. You ignore the different jobs, different hobbies, and different daily routines. You treat the overlap as a supernatural blueprint, when in truth, your brain selectively highlights similarities to build a narrative out of randomness. You aren't seeing fate at work. You are watching confirmation bias actively sculpt a miracle out of statistical noise. The two William Wests step into the cold, stone intake hall of Leavenworth Penitentiary in 1903. All right, keep your hands where I can see them. I don't want to see you reaching for anything. What's your name? You measure his skull, his arm span, and his torso using the famous Bertillon system, the gold standard of forensic identification. Suddenly, you freeze. The measurements match an existing inmate perfectly. You pull the file of inmate William West, who is already serving a life sentence inside the prison walls. You bring the two men face to face. They look like identical twins, share nearly identical names, and register identical physical dimensions, yet both insist they have never met. This famous case was hailed worldwide as the dramatic moment that destroyed anthropometric measurements and forced law enforcement to adopt fingerprinting. But when you dig beneath the historical legend, the clean narrative shatters. Modern forensic historians have revealed that the story of the two William Wests was heavily embellished, edited, and retold by aggressive fingerprint advocates who needed a dramatic marketing case to discredit the older Bertillon method. The two men were likely undisclosed twin brothers or close relatives, and the prison staff used their uncanny similarity to sell a new technology. Why does that embellished prison legend survive in textbooks today? Because your brain craves clean, decisive turning points. You want a dramatic story where an impossible coincidence exposed the flaw in human measurement overnight. You accept the myth of the two Wests because it satisfies your desire for a grand revelation, forgetting that institutions often construct perfect narratives to replace messy realities. You trust the story, not because it was precise, but because it felt too incredible to doubt. The birthday paradox. Picture yourself standing in a crowded room at a party, looking around at 22 other guests. Someone makes a bet that two people in this room share the exact same birth date, month, and day. Your intuition immediately rebels. You calculate that there were 365 days in a year, so 23 people couldn't possibly overlap. You feel confident taking the bet, assuming the odds of a match are slim. Then, the room goes around checking birth dates, and two people raise their hands. You just lost your money to a mathematical certainty. In a room of just 23 people, the probability that two individuals share a birthday actually exceeds 50%. If you add just 47 more people to reach a room of 70, the probability surges past 99.9%. The math feels wrong in your chest, but it is absolute. Why does your intuition fail so spectacularly here? Because your brain naturally calculates your own birthday against everyone else, making only 22 individual comparisons. But the math isn't checking just you. It is checking every single possible pairing in the room, which equals 253 distinct pairs. When you shift from one-to-one thinking to network combinations, the probability explodes. This is the exact pivot point where spectacle turns into cold mathematics. Every bizarre coincidence you have ever experienced isn't a crack in reality. It is simply your brain underestimating the silent power of exponential combinations. Law of large numbers. Think back to the single most improbable moment of your life. A chance encounter in a foreign city, a dream that came true the next morning, or a string of luck that felt guided by an unseen hand. You felt chosen, or haunted, or watched by the universe. But step back and look at the global scale of human existence. There are 8 billion people on Earth, each experiencing hundreds of distinct events every single day. That produces trillions of daily interactions across the planet. In 1989, statisticians Percy Diaconis and Frederick Mosteller formalized the law of truly large numbers. They proved that with a large enough sample size, any event with a 1 in a million chance is not just possible, it is mathematically mandatory. Across 8 billion people, a 1 in a million event happens roughly 8,000 times every single day. Search Diaconis-Mosteller Law of Truly Large Numbers to inspect the exact peer-reviewed mathematical proofs behind this calculation. The coincidence in your own life was not unlikely at all. Across the vast surface of the Earth, somebody was always going to experience that exact mind-bending alignment today. The only reason it feels supernatural, divine, or terrifying is that it happened to be you. You are not living in a simulation, and time is not bending for your story. You are simply a single point of awareness, experiencing the inevitable arithmetic of a massive universe. There's one more pattern underneath everything you just heard, and it connects all 8 of these to something much larger. If this one landed, there's a companion to it. Same idea, taken somewhere stranger. It's on screen now.